No one could stop the CEO's crying daughter. Not the doctors, not the expensive nannies, not even her own billionaire father. But the moment a poor young woman in worn-out shoes held the little girl against her chest, the baby went completely silent. Inside the massive Kingsley mansion, servants froze in shock. The child who had screamed every night for weeks suddenly clung tightly to the stranger like she already knew her. And the powerful CEO standing across the nursery couldn't look away from the mysterious woman calming his daughters, because something about her eyes felt painfully familiar. But who was she really? Why did the crying baby stop only in her arms? And why did the little girl begin smiling at the exact woman who wasn't supposed to know her at all? For 17 nights, the cries echoed through the enormous Kingsley mansion like a curse nobody could break. The nursery lights never went off anymore. Expensive toys imported from Europe covered the white marble floor. Half-empty baby bottles sat cold beside untouched medical equipment worth more than most families earned in a year. The giant glass windows overlooked the glowing city skyline, but inside the nursery, exhaustion and helplessness had replaced luxury. 3 nannies stood nervously near the doorway, while another zipped her suitcase with trembling hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the head maid. "I can't do this anymore." "Please," the older maid begged quietly. "Mr. Kingsley doubled everyone's salary." The nanny shook her head fearfully as Lily's piercing cries filled the hallway again. "It's not normal," she muttered before hurrying away. Upstairs, Ethan Kingsley stood beside the crib in wrinkled clothes that no billionaire CEO should have been wearing. His dark hair was messy from running frustrated hands through it all night. His expensive watch remained untouched on the table beside him because sleep had stopped mattering days ago. Baby Lily screamed uncontrollably in his arms. "Lily, please," Ethan whispered tiredly, packing slowly across the nursery. "I'm trying." But the baby only cried harder. The sound tore through him, because it dragged him back to another terrible night 12 years earlier. A ringing phone. His younger brother's name flashing repeatedly on the screen. A board meeting. A delayed answer. Then police lights. Then silence forever. Even now, Ethan sometimes woke hearing the final voicemail. "Ethan, please pick up." That guilt had shaped the man he became. Cold. Controlled. Emotionally unreachable. After his brother's death during the kidnapping tragedy, Ethan buried himself inside work until he became the youngest executive in Kingsley global history. Newspapers called him the Ice Prince of Wall Street. Investors admired him because feelings never influenced his decisions. But standing here now, unable to comfort his own daughter, Ethan felt like a failure again. Baby Lily's tiny face turned red from crying. He gently rocked her. "Please stop crying, please." Nothing worked. Not the pediatric specialists flown in from Switzerland. Not the sleep therapists. Not the famous childcare consultants. One doctor quietly suggested the baby might be emotionally distressed from maternal separation after birth. Ethan nearly lost his temper because that explanation only deepened the mystery surrounding Lily's mother, the unknown woman who abandoned the child outside the mansion gates 6 weeks earlier. The handwritten note still haunted him. "Her name is Lily. Please don't let her feel abandoned." Those words replayed endlessly in his mind because whoever wrote them sounded heartbroken, not cruel. A soft knock interrupted him. Richard Kingsley entered the nursery. Even in his 60s, Ethan's father carried the intimidating presence that built Kingsley Global into one of the most powerful companies in America. His tailored suit looked flawless despite the late hour. Power followed him naturally. But tonight, even Richard looked exhausted. "She's still crying," he asked quietly. Ethan gave a bitter laugh. What gave it away? Richard walked toward the crib carefully. For a brief second, his expression softened while looking at Lily. She was the first child born into the Kingsley bloodline in nearly 3 decades. The board had practically celebrated after DNA results confirmed Ethan was the father. Because without an heir, control of Kingsley Global would eventually pass outside the family. Richard's voice hardened again. The board meeting is tomorrow. Ethan's jaw tightened instantly. Not now. You disappear from meetings. You ignore investors. The media already suspects something is wrong. My daughter is screaming herself sick. And your company is collapsing while you hold a bottle. Ethan stared at him coldly. She's my daughter, not a business strategy. Silence stretched between them. Richard looked away first. Deep down, guilt flickered across the older man's face because years earlier he made the same mistake, choosing business over family until his wife died emotionally isolated inside elite society. That hidden regret explained why Richard obsessed over legacy now. Losing his wife and younger son had made him terrified of the Kingsley name disappearing entirely. Lily suddenly screamed louder. The sound echoed through the mansion. Downstairs, several staff members exchanged worried glances. Then, the front gate bell rang unexpectedly. At nearly midnight, the security monitor revealed a young woman standing outside the gates, holding a worn leather bag against her chest. Her clothes were simple. Her shoes looked old from years of walking long distances. Loose strands of dark hair framed a pale, exhausted face. But her eyes, there was something calm and quietly strong about them. The guard frowned through the intercom. Who are you? The young woman swallowed nervously. I came about the nanny position. Upstairs, the crying suddenly paused for 3 strange seconds. Ethan froze. Lily blinked silently toward the nursery door. Then she cried again. But somehow, softer this time. Far below, the young woman lifted trembling fingers toward the necklace hidden beneath her sweater, a tiny silver charm shaped like a moon. A gift Ethan once gave her in a candlelit bookstore. A gift she never stopped wearing. And neither of them knew. Their lives were about to collide again. The rain had stopped by the time Ava Bennett stepped inside the Kingsley mansion, but her hands still trembled from fear. Not because of the size of the estate. Not because of the security guards watching her carefully. But because somewhere upstairs, her daughter was crying. The sound reached her faintly even from the grand entrance hall, and the instant she heard it, something inside her nearly broke apart. Name, the head maid asked professionally. Ava Clark, she lied softly. The fake surname came from an old customer at the cafe where she once worked. During pregnancy, Ava had memorized small details from strangers, teaching herself how to disappear if she ever needed to. Fear had prepared her long before tonight. The mansion around her looked like another world entirely. Crystal chandeliers, imported marble floors, paintings worth millions. Yet despite all the wealth, the house felt painfully cold. As the maid reviewed her papers, Ava's eyes drifted upward toward the nursery floor. Lily cried again. Ava unconsciously pressed her palm against her chest. Months earlier, she had held this same baby inside a tiny hospital room while whispering promises through tears. I'll come back for you, she had cried. And now she had. But not as a mother. As a stranger. Before the maid could speak again, a deep male voice echoed from the staircase. Another nanny. Ava froze instantly. Ethan Kingsley descended slowly, exhausted and sharp-eyed, wearing a black shirt with rolled sleeves. Even tired, he carried the effortless authority of a man born into power. Their eyes met. For one terrifying second, Ava thought he recognized her. But months of suffering had changed her. She looked thinner now, paler, older. Ethan barely glanced at her before rubbing tired fingers across his forehead. She won't stay long, he muttered bitterly. None of them do. Then Lily's cries echoed downstairs again. And for reasons Ethan couldn't explain. The baby suddenly sounded calmer standing near Ava. Ethan led Ava upstairs without another word, but the closer they moved toward the nursery, the tighter Ava's chest became. Lily's cries grew louder. Ra. Desperate. Ava recognized every variation of that cry because during the short weeks after birth, she had memorized her daughter's sounds the way other mothers memorized prayers. Hungry cries. Sleepy cries. Lonely cries. This cry was different. It was the same cry Lily made the night Ava left her outside the mansion gates. The memory stabbed through her instantly. A freezing dawn. Her baby wrapped carefully in blankets. A handwritten note shaking in her fingers because tears blurred the ink. Please don't let her feel abandoned. Ava had hidden behind a tree afterward, watching security carry Lily inside while silently begging God not to let her daughter hate her someday. Now she stood outside that same child's nursery, pretending to be a stranger. The door opened. Lily screamed inside the massive white room while two nannies struggled helplessly beside the crib. One nurse checked the baby monitor anxiously. She hasn't slept more than 40 minutes, the nurse explained. Her heartbeat only stabilizes briefly before rising again. Ethan moved toward the crib immediately. I'll take her. But the moment he lifted Lily, the crying intensified violently. Ava's fingers twitched instinctively. Maternal reflex burned through every nerve in her body. She forced herself not to move. Don't react. Don't expose yourself. But then Lily suddenly turned her tiny face toward Ava's direction and stopped crying for 2 seconds. The room fell silent. One nanny blinked in shock. Did you see that? Then Lily stretched both tiny hands toward Ava, before bursting into tears again. Ethan slowly turned toward the new nanny. For the first time, he looked at her carefully. Really carefully. And something buried deep in his memory stirred painfully. Ethan stared at Ava a second too long. Not enough to recognize her completely, but enough to feel unsettled. There was something familiar about the way she looked at Lily, not nervous like the other nannies, not intimidated by the mansion or the family name. Her eyes carried something deeper. Grief. Love. Fear. Almost like attachment. What experience do you have with children? Ethan asked coldly. Ava forced herself to stay calm. I helped raise my cousins, she answered softly, and I learned quickly. It wasn't entirely a lie. After her father died from lung disease years earlier, Ava practically became second mother to the neighborhood children, while her own mother worked endless hospital shifts. Even as a teenager, she knew how to calm fevers, braid hair, and stretch one meal into 3. Those years quietly shaped her into someone naturally nurturing long before Lily was born. Lily cried harder again. The nurse sighed helplessly. She refuses milk sometimes unless she hears humming first. Ava froze. That was impossible. Because during pregnancy, Ava used to hum the same lullaby every night while resting beside her apartment window. She had never told anyone. Ethan noticed her expression immediately. You know something? He asked sharply. Ava quickly lowered her eyes. No, sir. But Lily suddenly reached toward her again, tiny fingers opening desperately. One of the older nannies crossed herself nervously. That baby knows her somehow. The room went quiet. Ethan's jaw tightened. Impossible. Yet something about tonight already felt impossible. Then Lily screamed so violently, she began choking on her own cries. The nurse panicked, her breathing. Without thinking, Ava rushed forward instinctively. And the second she touched Lily's tiny hand, the baby went completely silent. Silence swallowed the nursery so suddenly it felt unreal. Lily blinked up at Ava with tear-filled eyes, her tiny fingers wrapped tightly around the young woman's hand, as though afraid to let go again. Nobody moved. The nurse stared in disbelief. One nanny slowly covered her mouth. Even Richard Kingsley, who had just entered the room behind them, stopped walking. Moments earlier, the baby had been choking from uncontrollable crying. Now she was calm. Ava's own breathing shook violently. Every instinct inside her screamed to pull Lily against her chest, kiss her forehead, and cry like a mother finally reunited with her child. But she couldn't. Not here. Not yet. Ethan looked frozen. "How did you do that?" he asked quietly. Ava swallowed hard. I don't know. But deep inside, she did know. During pregnancy, Ava spent countless nights speaking softly to Lily through her growing stomach while working late shifts inside the bookstore cafe. She used to rest both hands over her belly and hum old lullabies her father sang before illness stole his strength. Her father always said, "Bobbies remember love long before they understand words." Now Lily recognized the same warmth, the same heartbeat, the same touch. As Ava slowly lifted the baby into her arms, Lily rested instantly against her chest with a peaceful sigh. Then something happened that shattered Ethan completely. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, Lily smiled. A small, sleepy smile. The room went dead silent again. Richard's eyes narrowed sharply. Because weeks earlier, doctors privately warned them emotional bonding might determine whether Lily developed severe anxiety from early maternal separation. Yet somehow, this stranger had calmed her within seconds. Ethan stepped closer slowly. "What's your name again?" "Ava Clark," she whispered carefully. Lily suddenly clutched Ava's necklace tightly. The silver moon charm slipped into view beneath her sweater. Ethan's expression changed instantly. Because years ago, he had given that exact necklace to a woman he once loved. Ethan's breath caught the moment he saw the silver moon charm. A memory slammed into him instantly. A tiny bookstore glowing under candlelight during a city blackout. Ava laughing softly while arranging books near the window. "You actually read these," she teased after catching him holding a romance novel. "I'm conducting research," Ethan replied with fake seriousness. "For what?" "How normal people fall in love." She laughed so hard that night, she nearly dropped an entire stack of books. That necklace came days later. Not expensive. Not flashy. Just a small silver moon charm he bought from an old street vendor. After Ava once confessed, she loved the moon because it stayed beautiful even in darkness. Now that same necklace rested against the chest of the mysterious nanny holding his daughter. Impossible. His mind immediately rejected the connection. Ava Bennett disappeared months ago, after discovering who he truly was. After seeing his arranged engagement announcement on national television. He still remembered rushing to the bookstore the next morning, only to find it empty. No goodbye. No explanation. Nothing. For months, Ethan secretly searched for her while pretending not to care. But guilt followed him everywhere because deep down he knew why she left. He lied to her. Not fully, but enough. "Ava," Ethan asked quietly before stopping himself. The young woman stiffened almost invisibly, then lowered her eyes quickly. "My name is Ava Clark, sir." Lily stirred softly against her chest, calmer than Ethan had ever seen her. Richard watched the interaction carefully from across the room. Years of business taught him one dangerous truth. Real emotion always reveals itself in the eyes first. And the way Ethan stared at this woman looked nothing like curiosity. It looked personal. Meanwhile, Ava's pulse pounded violently. She knew the necklace was a mistake. After giving birth, she almost sold it for hospital money during Martha's surgery recovery. But every time she tried, she remembered Ethan placing it around her neck beside the bookstore window. "You deserve something beautiful, too," he had whispered. Back then, she believed he was just a kind corporate worker, not the billionaire heir to an empire. Lily suddenly whimpered softly in her sleep. Without thinking, Ava gently kissed the baby's forehead. The movement was so natural, so deeply maternal, that Ethan felt something shift painfully inside him. And for the first time, a terrifying question entered his mind. Why does she hold my daughter like she already belongs to her? The nursery remained unusually quiet after Lily fell asleep in Ava's arms. Nobody wanted to disturb the fragile peace. For 17 nights, the mansion had survived on exhaustion, frustration, and whispered panic. Now even the staff downstairs moved more softly, afraid the miracle upstairs might suddenly disappear. Ethan stood near the window, watching Ava carefully. Every movement she made with Lily felt practiced. Instinctive. Dangerously familiar. When Lily shifted restlessly, Ava adjusted her position before the baby could even cry. When the nursery lights seemed too bright, she dimmed them without being told. She gently rubbed tiny circles against Lily's back exactly the way pediatric specialists recommended newborn mothers do for emotional regulation. But nobody had taught her any of this tonight. How do you know what calms her? Ethan finally asked. Ava kept her eyes on Lily. Sometimes Bobbies just want to feel safe. The answer hit Ethan harder than expected. Safe. He remembered hearing the same word years earlier from Ava Bennett during one of their late-night walks. Love shouldn't feel confusing, she had told him quietly beside a riverside cafe. It should feel safe. Back then, Ethan almost confessed the truth about his identity. But fear stopped him. Not fear of losing status. Fear of losing the first person who ever looked at him like a man instead of a billionaire heir. Now standing before this mysterious nanny, fragments of old memories kept colliding painfully in his mind. Richard interrupted coldly. You may stay temporarily. Ava looked up carefully. Richard continued watching her with sharp suspicion. But understand something clearly. This child belongs to the Kingsley family. The words carried deeper meaning than anyone acknowledged aloud. A warning. A boundary. Ava lowered her eyes quickly. Yes, sir. But inside, her heart cracked silently. Because Lily was hers too. Meanwhile downstairs, the head maid quietly approached Ethan. Sir, there's something else. What? The baby monitor recordings. Ethan frowned. The crying changes whenever Miss Clark enters the room. A strange chill ran through him instantly. Upstairs, Ava gently hummed the old lullaby again. And somehow, Lily smiled in her sleep. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The mansion was finally quiet for the first time in weeks, but instead of relief, unease followed him through every hallway. He sat alone inside his office, replaying the nursery monitor recordings on a large screen. Again and again, he watched Lily crying uncontrollably in everyone's arms. Doctors, nannies, himself. Then the footage changed. The moment Ava entered the room, Lily's cries weakened almost immediately. Not fully, but enough to notice. Ethan leaned forward slowly. Then came the moment Ava touched Lily's hand. Silence. The video froze on Lily staring peacefully at her. Ethan rubbed tired fingers across his face. This makes no sense, he muttered. But deep down, another memory kept resurfacing. Months earlier, after Ava Bennett disappeared, Ethan hired private investigators quietly. They found almost nothing except unpaid rent records, hospital visits involving her mother, and one disturbing detail. Ava vanished shortly before Lily was abandoned at the mansion gates. At the time, Ethan ignored the coincidence. Now he couldn't. Meanwhile, upstairs, Ava sat beside Lily's crib under dim nursery lights. The baby slept peacefully against her shoulder while Ava fought tears silently. She had dreamed of this moment every single night. Holding her daughter again. Feeling her warmth. Hearing her breathing. But joy came tangled with unbearable guilt. Her mother's accident flashed painfully through her mind again. Blood on the road. Hospital alarms. Doctors demanding emergency payments before surgery. Ava remembered standing outside the billing office hours after childbirth, still weak and bleeding, begging for more time. If we delay treatment, the doctor warned carefully, Your mother may never walk again. That was the moment desperation destroyed her. Not abandonment. Desperation. Lily stirred softly. Ava kissed her forehead gently. I'm sorry, she whispered. Unknown to her, Ethan stood quietly outside the nursery door. And through the small opening, he heard everything. Ethan stood frozen outside the nursery door. I'm sorry. The whisper echoed through him with painful familiarity, because it sounded exactly like the woman he had spent months trying to forget. Inside the room, Ava carefully placed Lily into the crib, but the baby immediately stirred restlessly again. Tiny fingers searched blindly through the blanket until Ava touched her hand once more. Only then did Lily relax. Ethan watched silently through the narrow opening. His chest tightened. No nanny bond formed this quickly. No stranger carried that kind of instinct. Then Ava softly began humming the same lullaby Ethan once heard outside her apartment months earlier during one of their secret nights together. A cold realization slowly crawled into his mind. Impossible. Yet every clue pointed toward the same terrifying truth. The necklace. The lullaby. The way Lily responded to her. The timing of Ava Bennett's disappearance. His pulse quickened. Suddenly, another memory returned sharply. The night he found Lily abandoned outside the mansion gates. Security footage showed a hooded woman kissing the baby goodbye for several minutes before walking away crying. At the time, Ethan avoided watching the footage repeatedly because something about the woman's heartbreak disturbed him deeply. Now he needed to see it again. Immediately. He turned and hurried downstairs toward the security office. Meanwhile, upstairs, Ava opened the small leather bag she brought into the mansion. Inside sat carefully folded baby clothes Lily wore after birth. Tiny socks, hospital bracelets, and one hidden photograph. Ethan smiling unknowingly beside her at the bookstore weeks before she learned his real identity. Ava touched the photo painfully. You deserve better than secrets, she whispered tearfully. But downstairs, Ethan had already begun replaying the old security footage, frame by frame. And when the hooded woman briefly lifted her face toward the security camera, Ethan's entire world stopped. Because the crying woman, abandoning his daughter, was Ava. Ethan stared at the frozen security footage like his mind refused to accept what his eyes already knew. Ava, the woman he loved, the woman who disappeared without explanation, the woman upstairs holding Lily like she belonged to her. Because she did. On screen, Ava kissed the newborn's forehead repeatedly through tears before placing the baby basket carefully beside the mansion gates. Even after walking away, she hid behind a tree for nearly 10 minutes watching security carry Lily inside. Not abandonment. A mother breaking herself apart. Ethan felt sick. Every painful detail suddenly connected perfectly. Her disappearance. The hospital records. The lullaby. The necklace. Lily's instant attachment. And worst of all, Ava went through pregnancy alone, while he unknowingly prepared for a fake engagement arranged by his father's company. Upstairs, Ava quietly folded Lily's blanket when the nursery door opened suddenly. Ethan entered slowly. His eyes looked different now. Not confused. Devastated. Ava immediately sensed something was wrong. Mr. Kingsley. Why didn't you tell me? He asked hoarsely. The room went still. Ava's face lost color instantly. Ethan stepped closer carefully, emotion cracking through his voice. She's mine, is she? Tears filled Ava's eyes before she could stop them. Months of pain collapsed at once. You were engaged, she whispered brokenly. Your family would have destroyed me. That engagement meant nothing. But your world did, Ava cried quietly, terrified Lily might wake. People like me don't survive in families like yours. Ethan's heart shattered because deep down she was right. He remembered how elite society treated his own mother for growing up poor. Richard Kingsley spent years protecting her from humiliation after marriage. Ava wiped her tears angrily. My mother was dying after the accident. I had hospital bills I couldn't pay. I had nowhere to go. You should have come to me. I tried. Silence crashed between them. Ava looked away trembling. The night I went into labor, I called you 3 times. Ethan froze completely. Then slowly remembered. 3 missed calls from an unknown number during his engagement press conference. Calls he ignored. The same way he ignored his younger brother years earlier. Guilt destroyed whatever strength remained inside him. Ethan looked toward sleeping Lily in the crib, then back at Ava. And for the first time in years, the billionaire heir who feared love finally understood something terrifying. The 2 people he loved most had been suffering without him. He stepped closer carefully. You came back, he whispered. Ava looked at Lily tearfully. She needed her father. Ethan shook his head gently. No, she needed her mother. At that exact moment, Lily stirred softly awake. Tiny eyes blinked sleepily. Then she reached both little hands toward them together. And neither Ethan nor Ava noticed the nursery door slightly open behind them, where Richard Kingsley stood silently listening to everything. Richard Kingsley stood silently outside the nursery door long after Ethan and Ava stopped speaking. The truth settled heavily into the old billionaire's chest. Ava wasn't a gold digger, wasn't a manipulator, wasn't a woman trying to trap the Kingsley family. She was a terrified mother who sacrificed her own heart so her child could survive. Inside the nursery, Lily reached tiny hands toward both parents while soft morning light spilled through the giant windows. For the first time in weeks, the mansion felt peaceful. But peace never lasted long inside the Kingsley family. By sunrise, the board members already filled the downstairs conference room after rumors spread that Ethan had secretly brought the baby's unknown mother into the mansion. Richard entered first, then Ethan beside Ava. The room instantly shifted. Expensive executives whispered while staring at Ava's simple clothes. Some didn't even try hiding their judgment. Ethan noticed immediately, and suddenly remembered something painful from childhood. His mother standing alone at elite charity parties, while wealthy women mocked her accent behind fake smiles. That memory explained why Richard became obsessed with status after her death. He spent years believing wealth was the only shield powerful enough to protect family from humiliation. But somewhere along the way, protection became control. One board member spoke coldly. So this is the woman who abandoned the child. Ava's face lost color instantly. Before she could answer, Ethan slammed both hands against the table violently. She didn't abandon anyone. Silence exploded across the room. Ethan's voice shook with emotion. She gave birth alone while her mother fought for her life after a car accident. She had hospital bills she couldn't pay while I stood smiling at a fake engagement press conference like an idiot. Nobody spoke. For years, Ethan Kingsley never lost emotional control publicly. Until today. Another executive frowned. Even if the story is true, public scandal could damage investor confidence. Ethan gave a bitter laugh. My daughter cried for 17 nights in a mansion full of millionaires because the only thing she needed was her mother. So if this company cannot understand that, he paused painfully, then maybe I don't deserve to lead it. Ava looked at him in shock. Richard slowly turned toward his son. And for the first time in years, he saw not the cold businessman Ethan became, but the little boy grief had hardened after losing his brother. Then Lily suddenly began crying upstairs through the baby monitor speaker, sitting on the conference table. The sharp cries instantly filled the room. Everyone froze. A nanny's voice panicked through the monitor. She won't calm down again. Without hesitation, Ava hurried upstairs. The cries continued echoing downstairs for several long seconds. Then, silence. Complete silence. The entire boardroom stared at the monitor. A moment later, the nanny whispered emotionally. She stopped crying the second Miss Bennet held her. Nobody in the room could argue with what they just heard. Richard slowly closed his eyes. Years ago, after Ethan's mother died, baby Ethan cried exactly the same way for weeks. No nanny could comfort him either. Only his mother had been able to calm him instantly. Richard never forgot that helpless feeling. Now history stood before him again. Only this time, he had one chance to fix it. He rose slowly from his chair. The meeting is over. The executives looked confused. Richard's voice turned sharp and commanding. A mother staying beside her child is not a scandal. It is common sense. One by one, the board members quietly left. Downstairs finally emptied. Upstairs, Ava stood beside the nursery window, holding Lily against her shoulder, while soft sunlight touched both their faces. Ethan entered quietly behind them. "You defended me," Ava whispered without turning. "I should have done it months ago." Emotion thickened the room. Ava finally faced him fully. "I was so angry at you," she admitted tearfully. "But the worst part was I still loved you." Ethan stepped closer carefully. "I never stopped loving you." Then he reached trembling fingers toward Lily's tiny hand. For years, Ethan feared attachment because everyone he loved seemed to disappear. His brother, his mother, then Ava. But now Lily grabbed his finger tightly and laughed softly. Not cried, laughed, and something broken inside him finally healed. Weeks later, headlines exploded across the country after Ethan publicly canceled the arranged engagement and introduced Ava Bennett during a Kingsley Global charity gala. Reporters expected scandal. Instead, they witnessed something unforgettable. While cameras flashed wildly, Lily suddenly became restless in the crowd. Before panic could rise, Ava gently held her close. The baby instantly relaxed against her chest. The entire ballroom softened watching the moment. Even Richard smiled quietly from across the room. Months later, Ava's mother slowly learned to walk again during rehabilitation therapy funded privately by Richard himself, though he never admitted it openly. And one peaceful night inside the mansion that once felt empty, Ethan woke hearing soft laughter through the baby monitor. Not crying. Laughter. He followed the sound toward the nursery, where Ava sat in a rocking chair with Lily asleep against her chest, beneath dim golden light. For a moment, Ethan simply watched them silently. Then Ava looked up smiling. "What?" Ethan shook his head softly, emotion filling his eyes. "All this time," he whispered, "she was never crying because she was difficult." He walked closer, gently touching Lily's tiny fingers. She was crying because she was searching for home. And finally, she found it.